What's up guys, SkyKevin here, and today we're discussing the highly anticipated Season 3 for Last Oasis. We'll be going into the details of what's going on with the game, the new features and changes for the update, and some of my thoughts on the game going forward. As I've been saying in my past couple videos, my prediction was right about them releasing the Sandworm, so don't forget to subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on my next prediction. So, let's get started. With this new season, everyone had no idea what to expect. The devs decided to remain extremely tight-lipped about the planned changes, and so going into the season, many players weren't really able to plan out how they would get back into the game after taking a break. When looking at the Steam player charts for the first day, there were only around 4,000 players, which is less than the Season 2 restart of around 6,000. I think with this in mind, it's pretty clear, at least for the first day onward, that the lack of previews led to less hype and less of a revamp for the overall player base. Keep in mind, I'm not considering the announced changes with this, and just looking at the numbers because I think it's important to remember that it's entirely up to the company to decide how they roll out the updates, and whether they want to tell the player base what's going on or not. Based on what I've seen here, I could suggest that in the future, looking at a timeline of around 1 to 7 days beforehand gives the players enough time to consider what the changes mean, talk about them with their friends, and ultimately time for creators like me to make hugely speculative videos regarding each and every word that they say. My plan for this season is to have multiple characters on the different realms with a few different clan groups, but I've noticed a few problems already with that. You can't actually delete characters once you've made them on a server, so if you do plan to play a server, remember that you can never change your character's name and it will always show up on your login list. Also, they've mentioned that some realms may have a limited time frame before they completely wipe. If you look in the server list, they have an hourglass category to look through them, but so far, none of them show a straightforward timeline. From what I've seen so far on all the servers, there are only spacious tiles on the entire realm, as people have been split up between the different low-capped servers. This is just an early prediction of mine, but I wouldn't be surprised if many of the realms die out due to a lack of content very quickly in the first few weeks. Further, I think the separation between capped realm areas will also be an issue. In Season 2, at least when it came to large clans, they would often travel from NA West all the way down to the European servers just to get a piece of those big fights. I think having different server locations from OCE to NA to Europe still being part of the game, but with the different clan caps, would definitely be a better move to at least preserve some of the player population on a larger scale, so that NA West can still head down to NA East occasionally for a big fight. This also goes for trading, in that now, whenever you're trading, it's only going to be within the same server, and many different economies would allow you before to go from Europe to NA to OCE just to find and trade some of those valuable resources. I think from what I've heard from many of the players on forums and Discord, most agree that there should be some sort of combined area for all of the different server locations, as long as they're the same clan cap number. Now, I understand why Donkey Crew wanted to separate the large clans from the small ones in an attempt to preserve the small clan player base and stop Zergs from inevitably taking over. I even suggested they do something similar, where they create instead clan-capped lanes for the small groups to hang out in general areas, but the large clans still have the ability to travel through or past them, only if they have a fewer amount of players on the map. My worry with this new realm system is that there is no longer a dynamic between the different sized walkers for each clan size. For instance, anyone on the solo/duo servers will have nearly zero reason to use a walker larger than a stiletto or toboggan, since they will never have a big enough crew to drive it. I imagine on all the single player servers, there's going to be no PvP whatsoever, because you need a gunner to leg another enemy walker. I'm having trouble picturing a bunch of Domus walkers driving around with remote ballistas trying to leg each other. Further, at least when it comes to the uncapped clan servers, there's next to no reason to have a proxy walker on a tile anymore. Since the entire population of small groups are now on their own separate servers, we'll likely have to wait and see exactly how this dynamic changes with the player base's numbers, but it's likely the case that there won't be such a thing as settlers anymore, since the clans are pretty much all the same size. As I've said before, I would suggest for future changes that they combine all of the same clan capped servers together so that NA, OCE, SA, and the Europe servers can still visit one another, but keep the max cap for each of the clans on those realms. In an even more ideal world, they would introduce some sort of cost to pay flots to transfer a character between those realms. So the large clans can still visit the smaller capped servers, but they have to pay a large fee in order to transfer the character to and from that zone, as well as they have to deal with the already existing clan cap that's in place. That way, you don't separate the content between the entire player base, but keep a separation between the different sizes of clans. Further, you would get to keep playing your original character. So far, Last Oasis has and always is balanced to be a long-term progression MMO, so having to level up new characters and unlock tech upgrades and build your walker fleet takes a lot of time and effort to do, and a lot of grinding. I'm guessing even the large clans won't be willing to put in that much effort and work over and over again. I think this is a feature taken from Rust, but in terms of LO, it's just a cheap way to get some replayability from the player base without having to actually introduce extra content. As much as I enjoy the start of a new season, I don't want to mindlessly grind tablets for hours at a time weekly or even monthly as the wipes happen. The best solution in my opinion would be to allow characters to transfer every single wipe. While you would lose your entire inventory and all your walkers, you would at least get to start fresh that way and keep the tech upgrades that you've unlocked before. At least in this scenario, you don't have to worry about the mindless grinding, but the game is suited to having to build a new walker fleet every week or month or however you want that period to be. Suffice to say, I think you would reach a much better balance if you could at least keep your character progression. The last thing I'll say on the new realms is that by dividing the player base, they've also messed with the balance of the trade update from Season 2. I'm predicting that given that there is no inequality for the player base, the trade station economy is now completely defunct. Before, you would have clans of all sizes using the trading station for items that they couldn't normally obtain, whereas now every clan is the same size, so the dynamic of large clans farming iron gear and putting it on the market for small clans to purchase is just completely gone altogether. This is the same for owning tiles, where every clan will likely be the same size, and thus most clans won't ever even bother being a settler, since they can just go out and take their own tile themselves. I'm somewhat anxious to see where everything goes from there, but we'll find out soon enough, as the developers are very aware of these concerns from the player base, and hopefully they'll act on it before it's too late. I've already heard rumors of many clans literally boycotting the game this season because they are so upset about the lack of player versus player content now that everything is split up. So now that we've got realms out of the way, let's get into the patch notes and changes and talk about some of those, because most people I've talked to have really forgotten that there was a lot of new content added to the game as well. In terms of the new hard map and rollout for that, they're going to start with the ancient city map spawning, and then the other hard maps, and finally the new Cali Spire map. This is a large map with spires in the middle, and as far as I'm aware, will be a PvE driven mountain that you can grapple up to the top of, where hut-like structures will be shooting floating mines at nearby raptor walkers, and you'll get a chance to fight some new Rupus. You can get useful loot like nomad cloth from these camps, so it should be a great place to farm, as long as the new Rupus don't prove to be a bit of a problem. Since the two new Rupus are ranged and fight with throwing firebombs and stones, I'm a little worried whether you'll be able to reliably fight them without constantly being killed. But we'll have to wait and see how much actual PvE content is there, and whether you'll want to consistently farm these areas. It could very well end up like the usual grind of Rupu camps that we have now. In terms of gameplay, they've removed clan caps, since that's been taken care of the new realm system, and exoskeletons should now be affected by throwing nets. This should be a great new counter to them and give more reason to use handheld throwing nets in a battle. For structures and bases, they've stopped catapults being able to shoot through stone walls, although you can likely still shoot through a window on a base, and defensive towers have been added back into the game with increased structure costs. The new Raptor Walker has been added to the game. This is a flying walker that uses torque in order to fly, and to make it, you need a new resource called Lightwood, which can only be harvested in the new Spire map. It also costs 22 tablets to unlock in the tech tree. They also fixed the grappling area for walker wings, and improved the Falco and toboggan movement. Now when you upgrade a walker level, you have to do it one at a time, since before the resource cost would get so high that upgrading to level 20 would take more resources than your character could physically carry. And lastly, they changed some render distance issues with the dinghy, and fixed Hornet and Spiders sharing the same upgrade level in the crafting menu. As I said in the beginning of the video, my prediction was right. They finally added the giant worm. This is likely going to be an event map on open sand, and there will be resources that small groups can harvest on the outskirts, probably similar to how the iron maps are laid out as well. This is obviously where you would probably harvest worm sand, which is part of the crafting materials for the new advanced torque backpack item that you can find in the tech tree. As we've seen before, the UI has been completely redone. In my opinion, it's not the greatest design, and now you have to scroll through the inventory when looking at the cargo on a walker. I actually like the new health and stamina indicators because it's better optimized and you have a clear indication of whether you're at 75, 50, or 25% health. I've found a very annoying bug where when you're changing stuff in your inventory, sometimes dragging it onto that square won't actually work until you're on the bottom half of the square, something that I really hope they will fix soon because it gets quite annoying when you're swapping stuff out constantly. And what I do like about this is that the old design used a lot more graphics intensive resources since it was animated, so this one, with its more simplistic design, does run your game at a few more FPS. Lastly, as I already mentioned, there are a few new items hidden in the tech tree that I haven't really gotten to see yet and aren't included on the official patch notes. I'm sure we'll find out about those in the coming days as players unlock more of the equipment. In terms of the new content, I'm a little disappointed at how much has really been added. You have to keep in mind with this update, there has been no adjustment to floating mines or any counter to them for a walker missing a leg. I was hoping that they would add some sort of countermeasure or ability for the battle fan to blow them away. Considering the new map was supposed to come out a month ago, they've really only added a couple of new Rupus and very little replayability other than the New Realms Band-Aid fix that they've done. The new Spires map might be good for players to roam and farm on, but it may end up like the City Tile where there's no reason for players to farm there because they could produce much more en masse on the Sleeping Giants or lava maps. The Sandworm will definitely be a fun and exciting change, but I don't see many uses for killing it so far. I think they might need to rebalance the cost of some of the weapons and gear to include worm scales as a necessary resource if that's the case, or introduce some other kind of resources to come out of the worm itself, which they may have already done since I haven't killed it yet myself. But once again, this is just speculating on what I've seen so far. It probably won't be released until a couple of weeks in the future, once the other hard maps are introduced into the game, but it is probably the one feature that I'm looking forward to. Overall, I think most of the outrage we've seen from players has to do with splitting the player base up. Most people who were part of the end of Season 2 already had to experience a game with a very quickly dwindling player population, and their fears are warranted as things may go the same route this season, and maybe even at an increased pace given how split up everyone is. Further, it's important to keep in mind that everyone hasn't gotten a chance to actually experience any of the new content, so a lot of the frustrations from the player base come from this being the only thing that directly affects them at the moment of release. I don't necessarily agree with the changes, and I've hopefully offered a few simple solutions to fix or modify them, but I think of LO as a long-term MMO, especially when it comes to your character progression. So at the very least, when these wipes happen, let us keep our characters or pay flots to move them somewhere else. Anything to stop us from having to grind fragments and tablets endlessly. If they don't do that, there will need to be some serious rebalancing when it comes to the tablet and fragment costs for players to actually believe it's worth it for them to do that kind of grind in the first place. I've already seen a lot of players who are foregoing the tablet grind itself and making characters just so they can log on and PvP, but only when it's called for. This will eventually lead to players sidelining their characters, which is something that will affect the available PvP content in the game, and soon enough they'll all move on to another game altogether. We're stuck with this right now, and there's no telling whether Donkey Crew will try to rebalance the same content or adjust to go along with the player base's concerns. The main thing is we need to make the most of it right now, as there likely won't be any changes for at least a month or two going forward. We'll have that time to explore the new content and see what kind of dynamic changes result from the new Realm system. I, for one, am planning to play on multiple servers and possibly looking to do a full solo playthrough with more episodic content going forward. I'll still do my regular research and update videos when we get more responses from the development team and more content added to the game, but I'm very curious to explore the actual dynamic that Donkey Crew has created by limiting the player base in this way. So make sure to subscribe if you want to stay up to date on that, as well as any of the other future MMO content that I'll be covering this year. New World's going to be coming out in the summertime, and I might be playing some other MMOs as well. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.